we are going to start a series of videos for those who really wants to go very deep in the Anunnaki story and understand things not exactly from the Anunnaki story point of view, but from a scientific perspective. And this is because although the Anunnaki topic can be viewed from a conspirationist point of view, actually the Anunnaki thing started with science. It started with the discovery of the archaeological discoveries and things that could be seen around the world. Okay, I will start by saying that for now, you are looking for me talking in real English with you. So this is my real voice and this is my real English. For those who don't know me, my name is Lucas and I'm from Brazil. I use the alternative voice that you are used to listen in the videos because I think it's quite better than my own voice and my um and to do this in some videos. So this is the reason why I use the electronic voice, and because the accent, that's the word in which I was missing before, the accent. Okay, that was a course. This series of videos, we are talking about 10 videos, and these videos are a course that which are some classes that I have recorded in 2021 and 2022, 2021 and 2022. On that time, I was still working as a librarian, and on that time, I was starting my work here on YouTube. On that time, this English channel, the Anunnaki Ancient Mystery channel, I think that has something like 100 subscribers, or maybe less than that. And my Portuguese channel on my native language was growing. And by partnership with another channel, I have started to record this course, this classes, because they have stimulated me by saying that my content was so good and we have nothing like this in Portuguese, so they thought that it could be a good idea, and yes, it was a very good idea. So this course has been recorded in Portuguese. I have started a very different time to try to do this in English, but I became so tired to try to talk English by 50 minutes without interruptions in front of the camera, and I thought that it wasn't a good idea. So now we have a good technology that can translate my own voice and dub my own voice to Portuguese. And with the lip sync technology, you will be able to look to my mouth and you will see me as I can talk in English, as I was really talking English, but actually I was talking in Portuguese. So this course will be like this. It will be 10 videos. It will have scientific perspective, and it will sound like a time machine. You will see me a little bit heavier than I am now. You will see that with diet and some exercise, I'm very healthier now than I was before. And you will observe what um, type of feeling and what type of search and what type of research and what is really beneath those documentary videos that you can see here on this channel. Because on that time, I was still working as a librarian and YouTube was not my whole time profession. So I think it is very interesting for those who wants to understand many things about the Anunnaki, because, as I said before, the Anunnaki have a scientific perspective, and I think that many people miss this point. Many people think that it's just conspiracy, but it's not. Other thing that you will see is that on that time, I was afraid to talk some things. At that time, I was afraid to really expose my own way of thinking. And I was taking some different directions to doesn't go so heavy and shock the society with those kinds of things. And you will also see that on that time it's obvious that I'm talking about 3 and 4 years later. And I am studying this topic now for more than 10 years. And on that time, I wasn't studied this topic for so many years. So some things have really changed my perspective. And I have many knowledge now compared to what I really knew on that time. So take those things on your mind, okay? And don't be heavy with me with things that I thought on that time, and now I know very much about this topic and much more than on that time. But I think that what you will see on this is very important, and that's why I'm bringing to you in English. Please don't don't take care of my mouth, because I know that this technology of dubbing and lip sync does do very well with camera in front of me. On that time, I was not having, I didn't own a microphone like this and the camera, so I was talking like coming from one side to another, and then the technology does something very strange with my mouth, putting my mouth like that sometimes. But never mind this, and take your time to see, because it's 10 videos and it will be organized in a playlist here. See you in the next video. Thank you for your time and for all the support that you guys are giving to me.
Until the 19th century, no one knew about the Anunnaki. No one knew anything about this term, let alone what it meant. But today, in the 21st century, postmodern era, the age of technological information, if you type Anunnaki into Google or YouTube or any other video or audio streaming platform, if you look for podcasts, you will see everything that comes up. How do you tell what's true and what's false? How do you distinguish knowledge that you can be sure is accurate from knowledge that might not be? There are people who channel, and I'll remind you of what I said back in the introduction, in our opening. I'm not the owner of the truth. I'm not here to discredit or give credit to anyone's work. It's just an example. There are people who channel, yes, contacts with extraterrestrials, with the Anunnaki. There are people who have read books and are absolutely certain that we were visited by a superior intelligence in the past, which created various monuments, left marks on history, and that's why we're here today. There are people who believe that we are slaves to this system and slaves to the Anunnaki, our creators. There's a whole range and all sorts of different beliefs about the Anunnaki. As I said in the introduction, it's the topic of the moment and is likely to remain so for a long time. You want to know how all of this started, and that's going to be our starting point. I'm going to tell you very quickly, because it's a very extensive theory, what the Anunnaki theory actually is, the classic theory, so to speak, what Anunnaki means, and then we'll go into more detail. We'll look at this theory step by step. So, the person who supports, who gives substance to this Anunnaki theory, who develops the whole theory, is Sitchin or Zecharia Sitchin. Some pronounce it as Zecharia or Zecharia Sitchin. It doesn't really matter. They say the most correct pronunciation is Zecharia Sitchin. We'll soon get into more details about Sitchin, about who he is, about the Sumerian tablets, and all of that. The Anunnaki theory claims the following. 445,000 years ago, a group of extraterrestrials left a planet called Nibiru. Nibiru is an exoplanet in the solar system. What is an exoplanet? We have our solar system. Imagine this here is the sun, and we have, right, the planets of the solar system orbiting, right, making a revolution around the sun. And we have an exoplanet, which is a planet from very far away. And instead of having an orbit similar to Earth's, it has an elliptical orbit, In other words, it goes way out there, really far, then comes close to the sun here and makes its loop. It moves more or less like this. Every 3,600 years, it completes a full orbit and then comes close to the point where it was before. Sitchin then tells us that the Anunnaki are a civilization of extraterrestrials who lived on that planet, and that this planet was going through problems very similar to our current greenhouse effect. The planet's atmosphere was deteriorating, and it was necessary to find a solution for all of this. The solution they found was to spray gold into the air. This would calm the atmosphere and solve the problems. So, what happened then? Initially, Enki, a scientist, comes to planet Earth and conducts an expedition here. He realizes that this planet could support the necessary conditions, and then a large group of beings, the Anunnaki, leave their planet and arrive here on planet Earth. Thus begins the Earth mission. Of course, as I said, this is just a summary. I'm really skipping over a lot of the story here, the conflicts that happened on Nibiru, a lot of things. Otherwise, this course would be only about the Anunnaki story of Zecharia Sitchin. And we have a lot of fantastic material on that which you can explore. There are books, there are amazing YouTube videos, including one on my own channel if you want to check it out. With this whole story, sometimes in a shorter version, sometimes more detailed, okay? So these Anunnaki beings arrived on planet Earth. If we were to make a super short summary, we'd say they arrived on planet Earth, created human beings, and that's the end of the story. But it's not quite like that. The Anunnaki arrive on planet Earth, and when they get here, the scientist Enki founds a city called Eridu, or Eridug. This city would mean home far from home. So, a process of mining or exploration begins. For this work to get started, the Igigi or Idigo are brought in, who are the lesser gods. These lesser gods do the mining work. They mine gold here on planet Earth. This gold that is mined is taken to a command station. It's taken to a ship. This ship leaves planet Earth, reaches another ship that is in orbit around Earth, and this ship in orbit then sets off toward Nibiru. And when it arrives on Nibiru, this gold is processed, pulverized into the air. Anyway, even though this mining activity, the extraction of gold on planet Earth and its shipment to Nibiru, was a success, the amount of gold was still insufficient. It was necessary to expand this mission. So other gods were brought in, lesser gods, to carry out the work. And here I just need to make a small aside to say that some texts, Sitchin also ends up making this confusion in his book. Some texts mention that there are 300 Igigi, others that there are 300 Anunnaki. There are texts that mention the Anunnaki of the sky and the Anunnaki of the earth, and there are texts that mention the Igigi. It gets a bit confusing here, but it doesn't really matter which name we use. What we understand is that there are workers in the sky and workers on Earth. The workers on Earth are responsible for mining the gold. At this time, then, with the success of the mission, but at the same time the insufficient amount of material extracted here from planet Earth, more Anunnaki or more Igigi are brought from the planet Nibiru to work here. These gods then meet with Enki, who is already here. Enki is demoted from his position as the chief Anunnaki of the Earth mission. It turns out that Enki and Enlil are two brothers, both sons of the god Anu. I'm going to draw a little triangle here to show you, okay? We have Anu, the greatest and most powerful god in Sumerian culture, in Sumerian mythology, and we have his first son, Enki. But Enki, or Ea as he is also known, is not Anu's firstborn. He is, in fact, Anu's son with a concubine, even though he is the firstborn. Anu's second son is Enlil, Enki's half-brother, and the son of the queen, Anu's legitimate wife. So, with this, a binary world is created here, right, so to speak. A problem is created here. We have the firstborn, who came with the mission to lead this Earth mission, and we have the second son, the legitimate heir to the throne, so to speak, who arrives here to take Enki's place and lead this Earth mission. Enki then stays with Abzu, or Apsu. He remains with the depths, which is why he is considered the god of fresh waters and the god of the depths, and Enlil then takes over this Earth mission. Given that, the path continues with the ship that keeps orbiting planet Earth. The gold is extracted from here and taken to the ship that orbits planet Earth, and then sent to Nibiru. It turns out that the lesser gods are more or less like stressed out workers of our times. The lesser gods are stressed and they're rebelling. And then comes the episode known as the Anunnaki Mutiny, or the Revolt of the Anunnaki, or Anunnakis. They surround Enlil's house, which is on the sacred mountain of Viker. That's his dwelling. The one who answers the door, by the way, is a vizier, kind of like his advisor, and they say there, right, we're rebelling, we're not going to work anymore. And Enlil gets really upset, but he sends for his father. Nothing was done without his presence. Anu, who declared that they would then have to hold an assembly of the gods to make a decision. In this assembly of the gods, some gods even mention that they can hear the noise from their work, and that it really is too much to bear. But Enki, he has an idea. This idea comes to him in a sort of dream, something like a half-asleep state he has with a supposed entity called Galzu, who had presented himself as a messenger of the Creator. And he brings this message to the assembly of the gods, saying that there is a being wandering through Africa that can be mixed with the Anunnaki, with elements of the Anunnaki, to create a new life, to create a new being that could then take over the work of the Ijajai, the lesser gods. Enki is authorized to carry out this work, along with Ninma, Nigmel, Ninhursag, who is Enki's sister, and the two of them then set out to make these attempts, to create this being through trial and error. The method that appears in the myths and is described by Sitchin is very similar to the scientific method itself. It's trial and error, seeing what works and what doesn't. And then they manage to create the first being, which is gestated. The idea is to combine material from the Abzu or the depths, what's referred to as clay or mud, mix it with the Anunnaki. Mix the elements of the Anunnaki so that from this, life can emerge, which is then gestated in the womb of the goddess Ninma or Mursag. Interesting, right? So, the new being is created, the new being emerges, and the first beings of this kind are the Adapa. Correction, the first being created in the laboratory is Adamu, the atom. Then comes Adapa, who is the perfect model. He really frees the lesser gods from hard labor. He frees the Ijajai from hard work. It is said, then, that the Ijajai can rest after the creation of these primitive workers. Even the goddess Ninma, who gestates this first being, is renamed Balaili and is then revered as the goddess of birth, also called the goddess of the vulva. Anyway, we'll get into these details a little later on. With the development of human beings, over time, humans also make a lot of noise. The god Enlil was never very fond of the idea of creating humans, of creating a new being that could replace the lesser gods and do the work. There is a concern, and Sitchin even points this out, that Enlil was never very comfortable with the idea of creating humans and replacing the work of the lesser gods with them. It was as if the Anunnaki were playing God, creating life and modifying genetic structure as they pleased. And it's important to highlight here that Sitchin then mentions creation through genetic engineering. This trial and error method is very similar to the scientific method itself. But as time goes by and Enlil's discontent grows, Enlil then sends some beings to the Eli garden so he can observe, and some things end up happening there, and Enlil's revolt keeps growing more and more. And because of this, Enlil decides he sends various diseases to humans to try to destroy them, but he doesn't succeed. And there is news that the planet Nibiru is once again approaching the orbit of the sun and planet Earth. And with that, great cataclysms could occur, shaking the gravitational structure of planet Earth, and a flood would happen. Enlil then tries to convince the other Anunnaki. A new assembly of gods is held, and Enlil tries to persuade the Anunnaki gods to take action and let the humans die in this situation. They all then swear loyalty and vow not to tell anyone, and in the assembly of the gods it is decided that the humans will die. There is an account from the goddess Minur, who later blames herself for not having done anything about it, and the god Enki leaves the assembly of the gods very sad and upset. He then has another encounter, a kind of semi-awake dream once again, where he contacts the supposed messenger of the creator, Galzu, who in this semi-awake state tells him that there is a solution and that he must warn his chosen one, who is called Sayushra, or Atrahazes, or also Adnapishtim. He has several names. He is known as the Noah of Babylon, or Noah of Sumer, Akkad, Assyria, the Noah of this whole story. And he tells him in a very unusual way. Since he can't break his promise, he approaches the reed hut where this being, let's call him Atrahazes for now, is sleeping, and he says, reed hut, attention wall of the reed hut, a great danger is approaching, a flood is coming here. And after hearing these words, Atrahazes then dismantles his house, builds an ark, and a story is told that is very similar, if not identical, but with more details than the one we know. The great flood comes, everything around is destroyed, all the buildings and everything else, and only Atrahazes, his family, and the seeds of all species remain. It is from this moment on, and this is the account where the goddess Ninhursag, mourns the supposed death of humans and wonders how she could have agreed, how she could have consented to such a disaster, to such immense suffering, to so much pain. And the god Enlil, maintaining absolute silence, suddenly they notice smoke rising from the ground, right? And this smoke is nothing more than Noah, Atrahazes, making his offering to the gods, his sacrifice to the gods. So the Anunnaki, it's important to note that the Anunnaki witnessed the flood, right? They escaped the flood in their ships. And then they descend from the ship to planet Earth, to the region where Atrahazes is. And in fact, Enlil gets very angry that a human being might have survived this destruction. And it is at this moment that they grant humans the right to life. It is at this moment that the Anunnaki agree that they will teach humans everything they know, everything they have learned, and thus civilization develops. Well, I hope you enjoyed this summary. It was a big summary we made of a very long story. If you do some research out there, you'll see that the text with the whole story is enormous. In fact, it's an entire book, as we'll soon see, that tells this whole story. It's a story of love, of war, of creation, of emotion, of sadness. It's a story that has everything. That would make a beautiful movie, right? I don't know how they haven't taken the chance to make an Anunnaki series yet. Well, maybe they haven't done it because there are some things here that have a scientific basis. That shakes the foundations of the world, doesn't it? We're going to get to all the scientific questions involved in all this very soon. While we're still here in this whole introduction, it's so we can lay the groundwork, pave the way for everything else we're going to see in this course. Where does this Anunnaki theory come from? The person who develops and popularizes the Anunnaki theory is Zecharia Sitchin, as I mentioned to you. Who is Sitchin? It's said that Sitchin was born in Azerbaijan and that he had the ability to read the Semitic or cuneiform, Sumerian language, because from a young age he was interested in this field. They say he studied this on his own. So, he's self-taught in this area and could, and was able to, read the Sumerian tablets, read Hebrew itself, and even read the Bible in its original language, all on his own, without anyone helping him do it. There's a rather sensationalist phrase, and I'll bring it up here, that's said about Sitchin. That Sitchin is one of the only scholars, and, to make it even more sensationalist, one of the only academics capable of reading the Sumerian tablets in their original language. I need to clarify this statement very clearly. As far as we know, Sitchin is indeed one of the few scholars capable of reading the Sumerian tablets. But Sitchin is not one of the only academics who can do this. This is kind of a way for us to twist things a bit, to play with words, so we can make what we want to say sound a bit more, true. So, what's going on here? Sitchin has a background in history. Not exactly. Sitchin has a background in economic history. And since his field of study is economic history, Sitchin can't really call himself a historian, right? He can call himself an economist who understands the history of economics and, at the same time, he's one of the only scholars on the Anunnaki subject who can read the tablets himself. Well, this line of thinking we've built here makes all the difference for us to start thinking. I'm already going to plant the seed of doubt in your mind so you can start questioning things. The whole story I just told you is based on this theory, developed by someone who, yes, claims to be able to read the original tablets, but has a background in economic history. So, it's different from a historian or a philologist, someone who studies these languages, translating the tablets and telling us the story that's actually written there. Right? This makes a big difference from a scientific point of view. Well, I can't just dismiss all of Sitchin's work here, but let's take a look at what he did that was so important and why, at the same time, his theory deserves some consideration, right? Sitchin structured his books in a very organized way. He studied the whole Anunnaki story for more than 30 years before publishing anything. And he first published the book, Genesis Revisited, which isn't actually part of the Anunnaki collection, so to speak. After that, he created the Earth Chronicles, a series of 7 books. The first of them is called The 12th Planet. If we had a classroom here today, I could say, who here has read it? Raise your hand. Those who have read it know what I'm talking about. The book is difficult, it's detailed, it's hard to read, hard to understand, hard to study. It's not just a little story, it's not some silly conspiracy, it's tough. Why? Because Sitchin read from many different sources. Sitchin was familiar with the Bible. Sitchin was also familiar with other, mythologies. Sitchin researched the Hittite people. He did a lot of research before writing his books. So when he talks about a symbol, for example, he takes some sign. The Earth Chronicles books are structured in this way. He does a whole analysis of the symbol. He does a whole analysis of a myth. He takes a myth, analyzes it thoroughly. He explains from which perspective that myth can be viewed. He identifies who those gods are. But Sitchin, at every moment, makes it very clear that the Anunnaki are visitors from the stars, beings who came from another planet. Sitchin relies heavily on the VA-243 cylinder seal to claim that, through this seal, we can see the solar system, the planets that are around the sun. And that the Sumerians, right, it was the Sumerians, not the Anunnaki, who made the tablets, it was the Sumerians. So the Sumerians had knowledge of the solar system. And how did they have this knowledge of the solar system? Through the Anunnaki, who supposedly came from Nibiru and told them what the solar system is like, how they got here, and the whole story. So, if he had all this information, he wouldn't present it in a scientific way, like, there are beings called Anunnaki, there are mentions of Anunnaki gods. No, he constantly says that the gods are astronauts. He constantly talks about the people of Shem, which would be the people of the rocket. He keeps saying that these are the Nephilim, the ones mentioned in the Bible, and he repeatedly claims that they are actually alien beings, extraterrestrials who came from Nibiru and created human beings. The thing is, there are 7 books, right? Look, I wrote 2, one of them about the Anunnaki. Sitchin wrote 7. Sitchin wrote a lot, studied a lot of mythology, and his books present a theory, but not a very well-structured one. Years later, Sitchin writes the famous The Lost Book of Enki. And it's this Lost Book of Enki that contains and tells the whole story I just told you. That's why I said, it's the story that's in a book. In this video here, we're not going to summarize the whole story that's in the book. Sitchin then describes 14 tablets of the Lost Book of Enki, from the 1st to the 14th. Sitchin says that the Lost Book of Enki is not a written book, but one dictated by Enki, dictated by the Anunnaki Enki to his scribe, whom he calls Endubser. Endubser would have been the chosen one, selected by Enki to record the story from beginning to end, from the creation of planet Earth, to the creation of human beings, to the arrival of the Anunnaki before that, right? The creation of human beings and the rest of the story that I told you. The lost book of Enki is very different from the book The Earth Chronicles. The Earth Chronicles, you could say, use an almost scientific language with analyses and studies. The Lost Book of Enki is a book written in poetic prose, an epic poetry characteristic of how the myths of that time were. There are 14 tablets. The big shock is that for those who read it, right, it goes like this. First tablet, summary of the first tablet, and then the pages follow with what happens in the first tablet. Then it's the same thing, second summary, and what happens. What happens is that whoever picks up this book to read believes that it happened exactly that way. In my view, the big problem with the Lost Book of Enki, and here, even from a librarian's perspective, is that there is no clarification that it is a work of fiction. It is a work of fiction. Why is it a work of fiction? But, with a bit of care, we're going to circle back here to understand. The tablets from the 1st to the 14th of the Lost Book of Enki do not exist. We could even joke, borrowing from someone famous, and say non-exist, right? These tablets do not exist, but in the Lost Book of Enki, they are narrated as if they did. What happened is that Sitchin played a kind of game, let's put it in quotes. He wanted to tell the whole story of the Anunnaki, from beginning to end, in the form of epic poetic prose. The thing is, the tablets, the original tablets, the Sumerian ones, which we'll understand a bit more about later on, are not in order. When you pick up the tablets to read, I might have, let's say this here is the chronology of the story, right? I might find the creation of human beings here, and then a bit further back, I come across the tablet about the flood, and then further ahead, the tablet about the creation of the universe. So, they're not exactly in order. And Sitchin imagined this order, trying to put the story into a chronological sequence. Not only that, Sitchin took, for example, if you go and tell someone you know about what you're seeing in this course, you'll say that Lucas said such and such. If you write about it and someone else reads it, and then another person reads what you wrote about what you learned in the course, it's going to be a little different, right? That's more or less how this mechanism works. If we were making a movie, we could say that Sitchin looked over there, found, like, mythology on the street, and then went over here. It's more or less like that. He took the episode of the flood, told how the flood happened, how it happened on Earth, how it happened on the spaceships, how it happened in space, how Noah felt. He approached it from several different angles and built an entire narrative in epic poetic prose. That's why you might ask me, do the tablets of the Lost Book of Enki exist? From the 1st to the 14th? No, they don't exist. They're not anywhere in the world, not in any museum, they simply don't exist. Unless, let me open a parenthesis here, this is actually the real truth, which is so strong and, well, harsh, that it's been hidden from us, and a lot has been kept secret. Look, we're probably never going to know, okay? We just won't know. Only if the world ends and the Sumerian tablets are all that's left. We're not going to know. But those tablets don't exist, right? Should we discredit all of Sitchin's work? No, we shouldn't discredit all of Sitchin's work. He studied a lot before writing his books. But for me, someone who has investigated and researched this subject for many years, who wrote a book about it, who is passionate about it, I'm going to tell you here, at the very end, what's most important about Sitchin's theory. What is its greatest merit? The greatest, not the only one, because one of the merits, just to mention here, that Sitchin has, is having the interest to investigate, to research, to make these connections throughout history between what's in the Bible, what's in the myths, in the epics, in the Sumerian tablets, to study the gods, what kind of gods might have appeared throughout world history, whether they are the same Egyptian gods, what we find in other cultures. Like the Phoenicians, for example, Sitchin really studied this subject a lot, so he deserves a lot of credit. But for me, my main point about Sitchin is this: if it hadn't been done the way it was, so scandalous, so bold, so disruptive, this book of mine here wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be here teaching a course and you wouldn't be there watching. So let me just give an example. Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe, or however you want to say it. Have you heard of it? Yeah, exactly. It's actually even older than the Sumerian civilization, but Göbekli Tepe is just in quotes, not to downplay it, but it's simply a monument dedicated to the gods in what is now Turkey. It's probably older than the Anunnaki, but it's not known whether there was actually a civilization or just a group of humans in that region. If you've heard of it, it's probably because of a series on Netflix. It's not something we hear about very often. Now, if the author had studied, written just one book, studied and claimed that it was a meeting point with extraterrestrial beings, oh, that would already be all over the mainstream media and we'd already be taking courses about Göbekli Tepe. So, for me, that's Sitchin's greatest achievement. Sitchin popularized the theory in a revolutionary way and spread the Anunnaki theory to the four corners of the world. And so, because of that, today we know about the Anunnaki. We study the Anunnaki. We investigate the Anunnaki. And I'm really happy to have you here with me in this course, just as I'm very happy to talk about this subject. It's something so dear to me, something I've studied so much, that I really enjoy. Right after this, in the next video, we'll see how the myths were used and turned into theory. Why did this whole story come about? What path does the story of the tablets take until it reaches us today? And soon, we'll understand the entire beginning of Sumerian civilization and whether or not we can trust Zecharia Sitchin's Anunnaki theory. We've already seen that, fully, it can't be trusted. But what parts of it might be true or not? You'll even be able to learn that in the future, in the course, as our lessons unfold. I hope you enjoyed this first moment together, and I'll tell you more right after. Just hit play on the next video, today or tomorrow, whenever you want. It was a pleasure being here with you, and I'll see you in our next class.